Greetings, dear friends, fellow programmers, and those aspiring to be. In this video, I would like to start things off by asking you a simple question. Do you ever struggle figuring out a way how you can improve some function or a piece of code and make it more modular, and also make sure that it follows single responsibility principle? Because if that is the case, and you do find yourself struggling with these types of issues, I think you will enjoy this video very much. So, if that is the case, sit tight and enjoy the ride. But before we begin, I would like to ask you, if you did not see the previous two videos dedicated to .NET, maybe you should consider taking a look at them, because the first one is dedicated to reducing nesting in your code, and the second one to proper naming conventions and proper ways to improve your code by naming things properly. And those two things are very essential for making sure your code is squeaky clean, tidy, and awesome. So, if you did not see those, before you take a deep dive into this one, I would like to invite you to take a look at those. And here we are. We're back in our Visual Studio, and we have the code we left in the state we can see right in front of us. When we take a look at this code and compare it to the initial version of the code, it looks awesome, but there are certainly still ways to improve it even further. So that is exactly what we will do in this video. So the first thing we should definitely think about is how to put in single responsibility principle into our code. And right here, we are not following it, because we have a whole bunch of things going on here, and our method called reduce even numbers to 0, even though it's properly named, still is not doing just one thing. It does multiple things. When you take a look, we're first checking whether our list is null and return if it is not. So we have basically a lot of different checks and also additional iterations and more checks and even more iterations in the same method. And we do not want that. We want to ensure that all of our methods are doing just a single thing. So it might not be possible every single time to utilize it and make it perfectly follow this rule, but this time we can do our best to make it as close as possible. But before we begin with that part, let me first try to explain to you what is modular code and code that follows single responsibility principle, because maybe you did not know about those principles and they're really essential for every good programmer. I want you to imagine the following scenario. You're playing with Legos, and each Lego block is a single self-contained piece, and it fits perfectly with any other piece that is inside of the set. So that means that each module in our code should be a single responsibility block that should fit with others perfectly. So now let's discuss what makes this modular code so great. The first point is, it is very simple to understand, as it is very clear to you that all the Lego blocks go together easily, or you can see which ones are fitting with others. It should be the same story with your code. When it is modular, it should be very intuitive to everybody reading the code what it does and how it fits with the rest of the code base. The second point, it should be reusable. So in the same fashion, you can put a single Lego block on top of many different Legos. You can use your modules of code in many different places and basically reuse them. So that way you are not repeating yourself, which is another principle of good coders, DRY, which stands for do not repeat yourself. And when you are building solid modular blocks of code that do stuff that can be reused, you are definitely not repeating yourself. And finally, the third benefit of using modular code is maintainability. which is also very important in our code, because when you think about it, it's much easier to work with small blocks of code that are self-contained than to work with a huge monolith solid piece of code that does everything within a single method, which is our current case in the codebase. So I think now is the great time as any to start tackling our code and making it more modular. The first thing you can always think about is to refactor your conditions. When you have some more complex conditions in your if statements, for example, you can always pull them out and make a separate function that is going to be dedicated to basically allowing you to express the condition using verbal communication. Now let me explain what that means in action. For example, we have this right here. We're basically checking whether the number is positive or not. And when it is not positive, we're continuing and jumping to the next iteration in our for loop. So we can pull this part out and we can just make a method that is going to check whether the number is positive. So basically what we will do here is pull out this piece of code that is our condition in the if statement, and we'll create a small private static Boolean method, which is going to be called isNotPositive. So we'll just return whether this number is negative or not. So we'll return true when the number is not positive. And now we can just paste the method right here and provide it with initial list of numbers and current index. And basically, this piece right here will do exactly the same stuff as it was doing before, but it is much more expressive than it was. Now, what else can we do while we're on this topic? We can also take a look at this condition right here, and we can split it into two different conditions as well. What I've done here is I have created a small private static method, again returning a Boolean value, which is going to return true when both indices are the same. So basically, it will just replace this part right here with this. And we need to do the same for the second part of our condition right here, so that is exactly what we will do. This method we have just created is supposed to replace this part right here. We will just add it right here, and we can remove these parts. And now we basically have two methods that are checking whether the indices are the same or if the value is odd. And when any of those two are true, we will continue to the next comparison index. We did not change anything when it comes to semantics of our code. It still does exactly the same stuff it was doing before, but now it's way more expressive and it explains what the condition is checking. Basically, these conditions are very simple, so you do not need these checks per se, but when you would have some more complex conditions and when you chain them together, in those cases you definitely could benefit from doing this. So now we can proceed to other parts of the code updates we can perform. The first part we can do is to pull out this entire block of code and put it into a separate method, because when you take a look at this, we are entering the code, we are just returning early if the data is not present, and we are entering the for loop where we will go through each index of our array and basically then perform some actions. These actions right here can be pulled off because they're a story for themselves, so to say. They're completely unrelated to other aspects of the code, so we can pull them out and put them in a separate function. So that is exactly what we will do. So before we start implementing this method for reducing even numbers, where all the logic is going to be living at, we want to do the following. We are basically, if you take a look, we are fetching the number that is at current index in our list. So we can pull it out and create a variable called current number. And then we can do this. We can basically replace that search for the value in the list, because it is an action that costs resources, and we do not want to repeat it. And basically, because of the fact that we will be using that number, that is current number in the array, we want to send it to this method as well. And because of the fact that we will be fetching this number twice, we are going to benefit from using a variable even more. So that is why I have created a variable here. We are checking whether it is not positive, because when it is not, we want to just break it off and continue to the next iteration. So when those checks are performed, we can proceed and implement reduce even numbers at different indices function. Now, this time when it comes to parameters, we do not have to make the list nullable, because we know for sure that it is never null, because if it were null, we would break things off right here. So we know it is not. We can name it numbers, we also need the current index, and also we need current number. Now we can proceed and implement this function. If you remember what we had there, we had another for loop which iterated through comparison indices. Yeah, we want to rename this. This is more reasonable name, and this as well. And basically what we have here, we can put this to bar because it is obvious what it is. And right here we want to use C# notation. So basically this is it. We have created a method that is going to be pulled off from this part right here. And here we have that while loop, if you remember. So let's make that method as well. Basically, this method is just copy-paste from what we had initially. I did not change anything right here. So this part right here can be updated to, again, be a separate function for checking whether the value is less than 0. And it would look something like this. And now we have it like this. So basically this is optional because, again, it's a very simple condition, but you still can do it. It's no problem. And yeah, this is it. I think we have made our code look way more readable and easier to navigate than it did before. It's completely modular right now, so each method does one thing and one thing only, and it is also completely available to us to reuse them. We can reuse any of these methods as many times as we like. Besides this, I would also have the courage to say that our code is way easier to understand than it ever did before. Of course, if you do not agree with me, please do feel free to go to the comment section of this video and let me know about your opinions about how you would improve this code base even further. And I completely agree with you if you said that right now we have so much more code, so it must be more difficult to maintain because there is more code to maintain. But I have to burst your bubble, that is not true. Because right now you have code that is way easier to navigate, debug, maintain, extend, reduce, update, change functionality of, or do whatever you like with it, because it's way easier to separate certain parts of it and do whatever you like with them without breaking the rest of the code base. That means you will have way easier time to get into the code and test it, see what's executed where, and basically then you will be able to do whatever you like with it. And also I would like to say, if you were using the initial approach that we started from in some job interview, you will probably not get a job. Even when you're a junior developer, interviewers are looking for people who are going to spend extra time and do the extra mile to refactor their code and make it look more like this, what we have right now, and way less and as far away as possible from the code we began with. So that is what I wanted to share with all of my experiences working as a team lead and going through a lot of interviews where I was the person being interviewed and also the person who was interviewing other people. So this is a very friendly suggestion from my side to you, and I highly recommend you to go the extra mile and try to understand how to make your code look like this. So that was everything I have prepared for you for this video. And I would like to thank you for watching and sticking till the end of the video, because it means a lot that you are still here. And of course, as usual, if you liked the video, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications, because we are going to continue sharing a lot of very useful information here. Also, I would like to thank you for watching and wish you an amazing day. Happy coding!